on our way down here.
Okay, good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting a light from nowhere. Alright, tonight I'm going to deepen the color surrounding the stove and set it up for the color or the light that will be sort of glittering right about here. But to start, I'm going to take some deep purple, make a shadow directly under the stove, and then the deepest shadow around the stove, around the red of the stove, and then taper that into a ultramarine, phthalo, and Prussian mixture that I've just blended together, which is a pretty dark inky blue. Both with a little bit of linseed oil just to smooth them out a bit, and it shouldn't take that long. It's a pretty simple step, but important for the next step. So here we go.
And why this is not clear. The Hippo's Zywa, or the one great light, is, though it is referred to in this unitary formulation, always the one great light. Its form of address when a pronoun is used is they. So perhaps this is, the dualism of Gnosticism at work, even in the formulation of a language for talking about the supreme God. Now let's talk some more about it. Yeah. Well, in that Valentinian thing, she was 36, but there were other versions where she was 12, somewhere she was 365. Some of them were like declension. For instance, I'm loath to speak of this in the presence of experts, but in Hinduism, there is the notion of tattvas, and I believe there are 36, at least in one formulation. Anyway, they start out very ethereal and general principles, like I think the first three are word, object, and cognition, and they have a special relationship to each other. But they are essentially descending categories of greater and greater boundedness. I think in the Hindu way of handling it, you come halfway down and you've reached the subtle earth, and then you descend the rest of the way down until you reach the gross earth. But there were various ways of interpreting these archons. The signs of the zodiac is one way. They were gods of time, and they controlled sectors of time. So that, for instance, in one aberration of Marcion's system, there were 365 of them. Obviously, they were day demons of some sort. So these were the things which were interposed between, and it was a matter of, in late Gnosticism, you see, the question of magic loomed here very large, because, first of all, the general mental set of the Hellenistic world was favorable to magic, but a thoroughgoing Gnostic analysis would lead you to the conclusion that magic is ineffective, that only gnosis can lead you to salvation. But in the late period, this became unclear to the practitioners of Gnosticism, and so they proliferated extremely complex magical systems of words, basically, and rituals, we assume. But really, the only artifacts of Gnosticism that we have are carved gems, which are talismanic gems, usually with these archons depicted upon them. The casting of horoscopes was tremendously important in Gnosticism, because that showed your fate. I mean, they took astrology probably more seriously than anyone has ever taken it, because they were so caught up with the machinery of cosmic fate. Taking a book from the Egyptian cults they contacted that were worshipping Osiris and Hermes Trismegistus, they had the notion of words of power, and they thought that as you threaded your way up through these cosmic shells, there were gateways, and you would be expected to have the correct spells, the correct words of power, the correct talisman to let you through to the next gate. and these gates were moving in constant relationship to each other, and you wanted to. There were moments of propitious death when more than one gate was lined up with another, which you could just shoot right through. So they really were very contradictory. It's the richness of it. Had they analyzed their own position more clearly and been more doctrinally consistent, they wouldn't have been nearly so interesting. But their own anarchy, their own devotion to, it was really a cult of individual responsibility, which certainly I try to connect to the psychedelic experience, because I don't think it's valid without a sense of individual responsibility. And then it was a cult of this secret knowledge, which was vouchsafed from within. And I want to say something about the logos in this, because many of you who've heard me before know that I associate the spoken voice of the psilocybin mushroom with the logos phenomenon of Hellenistic syncretism. For a Gnostic, the logos spoke gnosis, but it was not the same logos as the Platonist. For the Platonists, the logos was the world soul, actually the demiurgos itself. For the Gnostic, it was a way of gaining information from the higher and hidden All-Father, using the soul as an intermediary. But in both Platonism and in Gnosticism, there's contact with an interior voice through contemplation, which is giving true knowledge, was a mystery that was practiced and was very real. One of the wonderful things about Valus is he talks about, this is Philip K. Dick's book that I urged on you all, is he talks about the logos as a creature of pure information, and believes that it actually came, or suggests that it actually came to Earth at a certain moment in time, around the time of the death of Alexander, and that it was a creature of pure information which could actually form a symbiotic relationship with a human being by being known. In other words, here was something which when you found it out, it began to live inside of you. And he called this the homeoplasmate. The union of man and gnosis was the homeoplasmate. And of course, suggested that Christ was one of these people, and suggested that the Gnostics were not kidding when they said that that the inner initiates of the cult were superhuman in some form. They had this symbiotic informational energy creature living inside of them. And then he suggests that this was the reason for stamping it out, that it represented a form of symbiotically fused humanity that was just unacceptable to anybody who didn't have anything to do with it. So that then at Chernoboskin, at the monastery, whatever it was, at Nag Hammadi, these cultists found themselves surrounded. They were essentially the last people to have the complete message of the Logos, and they wrote it down. Now, since it was a creature of pure information, writing it down didn't destroy it. It only froze it, as if you were to put something into a deep freeze. So they wrote down this information and froze it. Then everyone who was a homeoplasmate died. He was killed. Something happened. But the stuff was in the ground until 1948. And now, if you desire to become a homeoplasmate, you need simply read this book, and it will begin to grow in you. This is a slightly insidious slant on the notion that if you will plant but one mustard seed, but it takes it literally, because our faith is a living faith. Take it within you and let it grow, and it will, as though they were actually speaking of something which had a replicatory power beyond that of a simple doctrine. It is a fanciful description of Gnosticism, but I'm sure that it comes closer to the feeling of what it must have been, because they were really trying to inculcate this thing in themselves which would grow and change their view of the world by giving them an entirely new kind of information. Very similar, it's almost as though taking the mushroom and having its experience is to have it grow within you. That would be a very Gnostic way of describing it, to say the mushroom is growing within you. That's why I feel as I do, why I experience as I do. It's a faith, which is a physical thing, which is intermingling and interpenetrating body, mind, and soul. And this is how they conceived it. This is what they hoped for it at its best. Yes, anybody else? Yes, in the back.
I've heard a lot of people he is, to put it mildly, rather paranoid. How much of his worldview Benjamin Bayless is sort of paranoia or feel, not paranoia is a bad word, it's sort of feeling of something overbearing, something ready to come down on you. How much is that of that do you think is Philip and how much was in sort of this thing that he was describing?
Well, he wrote books more paranoid than Bayless. If the final conclusion of paranoia is negative, I think the whole Gnostic thing is totally paranoid. I mean, the idea that God has abandoned you, that there is not one single clue in the entire universe about what to do about it, is a pretty paranoid view. I think that...
Alright, so we've got a pretty subtle glow left around the stove itself. It's sort of that alizarin red and red Payne's gray mixture. And that tapers into a pretty inky dark blue from the violet surrounding the immediate red. It's a little difficult to see, at least on my little screen here. Maybe it'll show up a little differently once I get it on the big screen. But there's some very nice subtle brush texture throughout the blue into the purple.
Perhaps mushroom, perhaps something.
And that will set the stage for the light cast onto the floor from nowhere, which will be right in there, center frame. So, cool. So we'll let that dry and work on it next time, or maybe next time, I'm not sure. I might work on the other painting I've got, or one of the other two paintings I've got going right now while this one dries.
Which is also worth reading if you have an interest in Gnosticism, is the transfigured, the transformation of Timothy.
But that's it for the moment. Thanks for watching, Earth. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting a light from nowhere.
About James K. Pike,
Have a good night.
If you will remember, was Episcopal Bishop.